I think sometimes what we see is we try very hard to prep our employees for change. In fact, I was talking to my service manager the other day, and he said when an employee asked, "What's the culture like at TrueIT?" and his answer was very unique, and I think it taught me something because I wouldn't have answered this way. He said, "Ever changing," and that's really kind of the way we try to prep our employees and enable them to know that one thing I can promise you is everything will change. However, if you're the right personality, that environment feels fun. It feels good. Now, that said, we know human nature is to sometimes shy away from change. So we've adapted to when we know the first thing we're going to get is roadblocks. People are going to put up their hands and try to keep the status quo.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow? Today, we're surrounded by change. In fact, you can probably say that we're always surrounded by change. No matter what business you're in, it's probably changed, whether it be the pressures of technology, competition, or something unpredictable like COVID-19. When you think about change, what is your first initial thought? Is it excitement or is it fear? A lot of people have this fear to change. We know this, we embrace it, we know how to prepare for change. Change is coming in businesses and it's necessary. But today we talk about embracing change starts in the leadership mindset. What I mean by that is you have to set an example that change is good, that change is something that allows for growth and evolution of the company, of the customer service, or maybe it's with the technology you're using. So I went into my research. I found a company that could really help tell this story about embracing change. We're here with co-founder Zac Paulson with TrueIT. They're a managed service company. They do application development as well, but they've grown really fast, being on the Inc. list, most recently at 1,057, and they've been there 3 consecutive years. How did they get there? Because they've embraced change. They've done that through acquiring companies that were bigger than them. They've done that through some of the details of how they engage with their employees and what they're doing specifically. You will take away some of the details about embracing change in today's interview with Zac. Before we get there, I want to remind you, we put together a specific training to help you as a founder create the transition to being a powerful CEO and how to avoid the 3 big mistakes that get in the way and how to fix them. That training can be accessed completely for free at genehammett.com/training. When you get that training, you will see that we're here to help you create A players. What has to change inside your leadership, inside your culture, and inside you at a personal level? Well, we go through that inside the training. Just make sure you go to it now. Go to genehammett.com/training. Absolutely free. Help you become the leader that your team is craving. Now, here's the interview with Zac. Zac, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Gene.
Excited to have you here on the podcast. I've already let our audience know a little bit about you, but I'd love for you to tell us about TrueIT.
Yes, so TrueIT kind of got its start as a managed IT service provider. We had hopes and dreams of taking the market by storm and really just delivering technology to businesses that didn't have their own internal IT companies. That vision has evolved a bit. We grew for the first 6 years of our life from January 1st, 2012 to around 2017 as that managed service provider doing a little software development. And then we ended up making an acquisition in the business applications consulting space. So we went from being kind of your traditional infrastructure IT company to being a full stack developer and software consultant, as well as the traditional infrastructure. And here we are today. We have about 43 employees. We have employees in 7 states, a couple offices, and about $11.5 million in revenue.
Well, I appreciate you giving us that background. Zac, we were talking about your fast growth. You made the list 3 times for the Inc. list. When you think about, growth and whatnot, I'm sure that you think about other elements that actually drive it, because the growth is a byproduct of what else is going well. What do you attribute the growth to in your business?
I would say that a lot of the growth is just passion. We kind of subscribe to the theory that if you're not growing, you're dying. And so we originally when we started out, you of course just had to survive and you had to hit certain numbers and metrics to just even make the business financially feasible. But after that, we didn't really set ourselves on a money goal as much as we just set ourselves on we have to keep expanding. I feel like more opportunities come the larger you get. So I can offer more opportunities for my team to grow in their careers. The last thing I want them to do is leave TrueIT to go on to a business because we didn't have a position available. So somehow making that available. And then it's just kind of fun. I don't know. I enjoy watching things grow. I enjoy building. I enjoy seeing the joy on people's faces as things um, go their way, and that's kind of what we've always done. And then our clients, we apply that same theory to our clients. We like to see our clients evolving and changing, and so we just kind of apply that passion to the whole mix.
Well, I know part of that is your ability to embrace change.
Yes.
Um, every company says that they have this ability to adapt quickly and embrace change. What do you really mean by that?
Yeah. Well, of course, being in the technology industry, this stuff changes so fast that you really can't even keep up with it as far as what we offer. But I also think that just life in general changes so fast. As our society has become more fast paced, we have to roll with those punches. We have to adapt. And maybe what we think is a hot product today or a hot offering won't be tomorrow, and we have to be ready to adapt to that. So in our business, we experience change each and every day. But then I also think we're always looking. We embody one of the core values of Kaizen, which literally translates to constant, never-ending improvement. And so myself, we make lots of mistakes. In fact, I would say our company is built more on mistakes than it is on successes. We just roll with that. And as you make those mistakes, we ask ourselves those questions of how could I do this differently? How could this have been better? What improvements could we make? And we don't disincentivize mistakes. We don't punish people for mistakes. I did hear it say one time that you don't get fired for mistakes, but if they become a habit, we might have a problem. And that's really kind of the way I look at it, is that we all make mistakes. We all learn from those mistakes, or we should learn from those mistakes. If we don't, then we could have problems.
Now, hold on for a second. Zac said something that I want to make sure we put a spotlight on. We have to adapt. Now, the problem is in leadership is we think we're adapting fast enough. We think that we know the right way. We've been the expert for so long that sometimes that clouds our judgment on how fast we're actually adapting and changing to the moment, or our style of leadership, or our ability to engage and communicate with others. Now, what I would urge you to do is think about your speed of adaptation. As a leader, you must be willing to evolve or die. You've heard this before, but I really want to remind you that evolution and your ability to adapt is part of the job of a leader. Back to Zac. I find with as many interviews as I've done with founders and CEOs like yourself in this Inc. 5000 set,
Hmm.
they have a very healthy relationship with mistakes and failure. And
Yeah.
and they attribute a lot of their growth because they have that healthy relationship.
Hmm.
Is it something that you brought into the business, or did you learn as you were growing this business?
I think it's something myself and the other co-founders brought into the business. We we just all had very similar personalities in the fact that none of us could come to the table and say, "Hey, we're experts in this. We've done this before." Now, some of us might have experts in certain disciplines like the technology itself or business acumen, but none of us could come in and say, "Hey, we've created a $12 million company before, and I'm just going to do it again. This will be easy." We kind of came into it with, we're going to cross thresholds we've never been, and that's exciting to us. But when we get there, we're going to realize there's more challenges, and we're going to have to deal with that. And I would say, you never anticipate how big your challenges are. I probably got done with the last 7 months of my life have probably been the largest, biggest challenge I've ever walked through, and we're finally crossing the threshold here. Things seem to be turning around. But I could have told you before what the other big pivotal moment was in my life, and how I didn't want to go back to that. So it's like we always kind of push that envelope forward. Um, and then you get this little reprieve. That's the nice part. There's a little reprieve to kind of revitalize yourself and reinvent, and then who knows what's on the other horizon.
So being in technology, I know change is constant
Hmm.
as we've moved from different types of computers and different types of how things talk together. We've moved to cloud, and it just seems to be one thing after another. and you've got to keep your fingers on the pulse of what's next. That's probably very natural to you. Is it natural to the employees that you have on staff, or do you have to use some specific leadership that allow them to embrace that change?
So I think that's a great question. I think sometimes what we see is we try very hard to prep our employees for change. In fact, I was talking to my service manager the other day, and he said when an employee asked, "What's the culture like at TrueIT?" and his answer was very unique, and I think it taught me something because I wouldn't have answered this way. He said, "Ever changing," and that's really kind of the way we try to prep our employees and enable them to know that one thing I can promise you is everything will change. However, if you're the right personality, that environment feels fun. It feels good. Now, that said, we know human nature is to sometimes shy away from change. So we've adapted to when we know the first thing we're going to get is roadblocks. People are going to put up their hands and try to keep the status quo. So it's been hard for me because I'm more the opposite. I'm more of a change agent. But I've learned now to say, okay, I realize that's your initial reaction. Tell me why that's your initial reaction, and tell me how we might go to this other direction. And it's funny because it's taken me now 8 years, but it's funny because the more I let them explain how we get there, typically they want to get there even in a better way than I do and a bit more passion than I do, but they want to have a little more control of the reins. And I kind of equate this to when you're driving down the road, I feel much more comfortable in the driver's seat of a car than I do in a passenger seat of the car. But I know some people that would much rather ride in the passenger seat and never take the wheel. And I've got to be cognizant that there are team members on my staff that would rather be passengers, and there are team members that would rather be behind the wheel. And I can't I have to be the leader, whether that's the lead car or whether that's the voice on the screen, whatever it is. I can't go ahead and take the wheel for them, and I can't kick them out of the passenger seat.
One of the things that you talk about there, other than the fact that I like my wife to drive because she doesn't complain when she drives, I was thinking about the whole empowering aspect.
Mm-hmm.
People like to have to lead change that they're leading.
Yes.
Right. When someone tells you you have to eat something different, it's difficult, right? Well, that's, but when you make that change, when you lean into it and you make that decision to lean forward, it's a lot easier to take, and you're committed at a deeper level. Have you seen that across your team?
I have. And that was a difficult thing for me as a leader. Being an entrepreneur, you will initially in the stages, that 0 to million and 0 to 3 million and all those different milestones you hit, sometimes you have to be the whole change agent and you have to be the driver. But as the company grows larger and you develop more layers of management, you can't be anymore. In fact, you will be a roadblock if you are the driver. And so what I've seen is you have to step back, you have to give them controls. And, I can't remember who said it, which leader said it, but if they think it's their idea, and usually it is, I don't want to take that away from them, but you may have the strategy in your head, but no idea how to actually roadmap that and get that done. If they take ownership of that idea and they run with it, it will be successful. However, on the flip side, if it's just your idea and no one's along, I think I've heard it said that if you're a leader with no followers, you're just out for a walk. And I felt that, especially through my entrepreneurial journey. There have been times where maybe my business partners and I were on the same page, but the whole rest of the company wasn't following us. And that was very difficult to move forward to those next stages.
Hold on for a second. Zac just said something that I want to make sure you catch it. The ownership of the idea. Here's a known principle. The person who has the idea is more likely to feel a sense of ownership toward that idea. So what does that mean in our world of work? Well, if the leader is always having the ideas and telling everybody what to do and making the recommendations, then that can be dangerous. It's great in the beginning because you're decisive. But as the company grows, as the culture begins to evolve, as you see empowerment as important, you want to let your people have the ideas. And one of the things that you can do inside this is when you're having meetings and when you're making decisions on which way to go, maybe you speak last, because when you speak first, people are going to default to that because you're quote unquote the leader, the CEO, the founder, whatever it may be. So I urge you to think about your ability to let other people take ownership of the idea. I'm writing a book about this idea of how people feel about ownership. But I remind you right now, because if you want people to feel a sense of ownership, you want them to share those ideas, and you want them to make decisions on those ideas, they're more likely to own the process, the challenges, and anything that comes along with making that a reality. Because when you own the idea, you own it all. Back to Zac. I know that you've been through some ups and downs with, acquisitions that you've made,
Hmm.
team members that are coming, sometimes going, sometimes you've scaled back to really refocus the business. How do you, at a personal level, deal with change like that inside of the day-to-day business?
Yeah. Well, I'm really fortunate to have two business partners that we've worked together for 15 years, and we have formed this group where we can really talk about anything. There's a lot of talk about safe spaces and those type of things today. They are my safe space. I can go in and I can give them exactly what I'm feeling, the raw passion, and we can reason together to come up with how to solve that. Lately, I'd say in the last 2 years, we've developed the same feeling with our executive team, and we've gotten to the point where we can have raw conversations, honest conversations, not just about tactical things, not just about strategy, but about feelings and how we're doing. I feel that's super important. Um, every entrepreneur knows that there's going to be times you can't share certain things with your employees. If every employee that started with a new startup knew how financially uh, destroyed most startups are and how quick they're burning through cash, they just wouldn't even sign up for the job. And so there's certain things you can't share, but you need to have someone, in my opinion, that you can sit down and have the raw conversations with. That's been super helpful for me. I owe everything to my business partners that I've worked with. They've been fascinating to pick their brains on things and the way they see things, because we are very different from each other. But on the flip side, they've also helped us be able to, like I said, throw the honest truth out and work through it.
If you happen to be listening to this on YouTube, then I want to remind you, go ahead and hit the thumbs up if you like this content. You can subscribe now and hit the bell notification button if you want to be reminded the next time we upload a video. Here's to you being a great leader, driving growth, and being a part of a community of others at Growth Think Tank. Zac, I got to zero in on this raw
Hmm.
conversations.
Yeah.
I could make assumptions about what it is, but you mentioned, personal issues, and maybe
Hmm.
it's doubts and fears, or maybe it's just uncertainty.
Yes.
What kind of rituals do you guys have around these rituals, being that you do them on a consistent basis? They become a natural part of the way you guys engage.
Yeah.
Does there anything come to mind?
You know, so pre-COVID, our whole world kind of went upside down in COVID, but we used to do, specifically my president and chief of operations, we would go to lunch regularly. And yeah, it cost some money to go to lunch. That was the business expense, but the value we got out of it and the ideas we got out of it were huge. And we would sit down and we would strategize. And if you follow traction in the EOS or entrepreneurial operating system, I think this would be the equivalent of what they call the clarity break, where you and your business partners sit down and you talk through it and you have strategy sessions, and everything's fair game. There's no, in fact, we just kind of started out, we usually have 6 or 7 bullet points. We cover one or two, but we really tangent off into what's really going on and what's really the problems. I found those clarity breaks, so to speak, extremely helpful to do that.
Now, beyond that, what is something counterintuitive you have been able to amaze around this embracing change?
Yeah, so counterintuitive. I think probably there's two ways you can focus on change, in my opinion. You can run away from it or be cautious, or you can run headlong into it. And I would say one of the things that we have done is we run headlong into it, and we use a series of failing forward to do that. We don't run into change knowing that everything is going to be unicorns and rainbows. Instead, we run into change knowing we're we're probably going to hit a lot of unknowns. Things are going to break. Things are going to not function as we predicted. But as soon as we get those out of the way, we now know that's not a path to go down. So I realize that many people spend a lot of time attempting to avoid failure, and the counterintuitive part is to actually get encouraged by failure. And I kind of rose up the ranks in sales. That's kind of where my background comes from, is from sales. And one of the switches I flipped in my brain was, the more no's I get, the closer I am to a yes. but that is not how we want to work as humans. That is very counterintuitive. Most people will hear that no, they get extremely discouraged. The business equivalent of a no is maybe not getting the capital you need, not getting the account you need, but knowing that there's something right around the corner. So knowing that if we just keep pushing forward, we're going to get it.
If you want to know more about the assessment, just go to genehammett.com/growth assessment, and you will get details about what it is, how it can benefit you and your organization, and more specifically, why you need it. I really wrote down in my notes here, expect the unknowns. Is there anything that you guys do specifically when you're heading into a new direction to look at those unknowns, maybe plan for them a little bit, but I know you're still running toward it.
Yeah. So I haven't wrote a book, but I said if I ever do, there's going to be a chapter that's called Budget for Weird. And what I mean by budget for weird is those unknowns will come, and they will oftentimes be extremely unpredictable. So what we do is most of us are optimists. We believe that things will be better in the future, so we expect the best, but we always do plan for the worst. And a little tidbit I got out of a book a long time ago that really spoke to me was, if you imagine the worst case scenario and you can live with it, go for it. And that's really what I've done is I've looked at things we've done and I've said, well, what's the worst case scenario? Now that we've got that built up, and sometimes they've been even worse than we've anticipated, but most of the time, the worst case scenario never actually happens. And if we can live with it, then we already have kind of that benchmark or that bar to continue going forward.
That is a great lesson, I think, for anyone. I wish I would have known that back in my days when I invested heavily and the money never showed up. The inventory never showed up. If you know my personal story, you know that this is not my first business. Right. But I really appreciate you being here, Zac, and sharing your wisdom of leadership about embracing change, what that means across the organization with your founders and with your individual frontline leaders. It really is a great conversation.
Cool. Thank you, Gene. I appreciate it. It's been fun to be here.
I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I enjoyed recording it for you, because I think embracing change is something that we all need to get better at. And really, in leadership, it's not just necessarily get better at it for ourselves, but how do we transfer that ease into our employees? How do we get them to see the grace of change and where they can actually grow as opposed to something they should try to avoid? Embracing change is a very powerful aspect of a company culture. Adaptation is something that we talk about a lot here. We measure it in some of the details that we have inside the 10 fundamentals of the growth assessment. This team alignment scorecard is a process of seeing where you are. If you want more information on the growth assessment, make sure you go to thegrowthassessment.com. When you think about growth, you think about leadership, make sure you think about Grow Think Tank. As always, lead with courage.